Hello, welcome to number 167 of the Notcast. Today I'm going to be talking about the Wedding Presents' fifth or eighth album, depending on your point of view, Saturnalia, and their seventh sort of album, Mini, released in 1995. Before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. I did say a couple of episodes ago that, in my opinion, Tennant and Lowe, also known as Pet Shop Boys, are the finest songwriting duo that's ever come out of Britain, to which one commenter described me as a moron. Cutting straight to the chase here, I don't have to put up with that kind of shit, and if your only contribution and interaction with me is to call me names, it's also going to be your last one, so be nice. I don't have time of day for this type of stuff. The world is a big place, people have many opinions, they're all different, but if your response to my opinion that maybe Lennon and McCartney aren't the finest songwriting duo of all time is to call me a name, then my response is to throw all your comments in the bin, where they will go unread for the rest of time. And there we are. So today I'm going to be talking about Wedding Presents, 1995 and 1996 period, where the band left Island Records, where the album Watusi peaked fairly low in the UK charts, and the band became more of a niche concern. This period in musical history, 1995 to 1996, was a difficult one to be a fan of many bands which had formed and come to prominence in the 80s and the 90s. One of the primary factors is if you ally yourself with a certain type of music, or people who are, adolescent, 15, 20 or so, when they start getting into you and listening to your music, they inevitably grow older. They change, the band changes, people leave, the band isn't the same band anymore, and all bands of that ilk have really struggled around about 1995 and 1996. So, for example, The Cure lost their drummer. I mean, they didn't misplace him. He left, and their guitarist and keyboard player. Depeche Mode's drummer left. R.E.M's drummer left in 1997. All of those bands became a little less popular, a little less vital, became a little more kind of weathered and war beaten, I think, a little bit. And the Wedding Present had exactly the same experience in 1995 and 1996. Their fans grew up, some fans went away and never came back. Other people realised that, like all great bands, the Wedding Present have a life not just for adolescents, and so therefore obviously the band continued on. So I'm going to pick up the story first with Mini. This is a 6-track mini album called Mini. All of the songs have an automotive theme, and the band's lineup has changed. So when they made Watusi, Paul Dorrington was a member on guitar, and this changed for, there's a postcard, more correctly there's a CD booklet there, and this changed in 1995. Paul Dorrington, formerly of a Leeds band called Tsetse Fly, left the group, and the band's lineup changed. Darren Belk, who had been playing bass, moved over to playing bass and guitar, and Jane Lockie, who was from Tsetse Fly, sang backing vocals all over the Mini album. And it's only 19 minutes long, 6 songs, so it was released as a 10-inch and has a fairly economical CD. Here it is, just 6 songs at a bargain price. The band has signed themselves to a new label. The label is Cooking Vinyl. Now, unfortunately, in my opinion, Cooking Vinyl is a label where bands go to die. Once they've been popular and they stopped being popular, they often signed with Cooking Vinyl. I think New Model Army, did it. Carter did it towards in the last years of their original lineup. The Wedding Present did the same thing. Obviously, bands don't necessarily get a choice about who offers them deals or what the deals that they're offered to them. They don't get necessarily to pick amongst multiple record companies. But Cooking Vinyl had a kind of a reputation that this was where bands sometimes ended their careers, or it was a band that signed to Cooking Vinyl on the way down as opposed to on the way up. And if there's any bands that are signed to Cooking Vinyl, I'm very sorry. I'm talking about my opinion of Cooking Vinyl in the late and mid-90s as opposed to now, which is almost 25 to 30 years later. And I find it pretty surprising that it's 30 years later. To me, this seems like about 7 years since this happened, although I know that's clearly not the case. So we start off with Mini, 10-inch, 6 songs, 19 minutes long. It's a brisk 19 minutes indeed. I mean, in one respect, you could say that actually lots of wedding present albums had a number of B-sides that went next to them. Watusi had, I think, 8 B-sides. The Hit Parade had obviously 12 because it was 12 singles. Sea Monsters had, I think, 6 B-sides. Effectively, for Mini, the band might have actually taken the 6 songs that might very well have been B-sides from their next album and put them onto a mini album to start off with, as a kind of an interregnum, or a way of almost restarting their career with an EP, and it kept them in the marketplace so that they were able to release an album and still sell records and tour. So the band recorded this as a 3-piece, as I've said: Darren Belk on bass and guitar, David Gedge on guitar and vocals, and I think it's Simon Smith on drums. Simon obviously having joined the band in 1987. So this is recorded at Rockfield, the same studio where Queen recorded Bohemian Rhapsody, and also I think where the Wedding Present returned to in 2018, I think, to re-record the Tommy album. And there were some photographs here from a Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow, and also, if you look closely on the cover there, of a Mini itself. And so this was I think was largely driven by the automotive interests of one of the members of the band, not David Gedge, to say maybe we could do something around driving. And so the 6 songs all have an automotive theme, although that's not immediately apparent when you listen to it. So when you listen to the Drive album, and here is the little booklet that comes with the 10-inch there, which I think is also taken from the CD. What you'll find is all the lyrics are around, not necessarily around driving, but they use motoring, vehicles and transformation as a metaphor. So the Drive track itself, for example, has a lyric about being driven somewhere by a fast person that they are very much enamoured with. The second song is Love Machine, which also, of course, is around that. But it starts with the lyric, "You are obscene, but I'm not your love machine. Turn it off, turn it on." And it's a lovely little lyrical conceit that ties all the songs together into a concept. Now, I hate to use the word concept albums, because when you think about concept albums, you then think about sad songs written by millionaire keyboardists about the sex life of Wales and so on and so forth. These are just songs which use the driving and vehicles as a metaphor. So, for example, Love Machine is around "I'm not your love machine." There's a song called Go Man Go, which is to an extent about transformation, change, about your life moving into a new phase. And Mercury, track 4, again, it has very little to do with a car that's called the Mercury, and I've forgotten who manufactures the Mercury, by the way. Last song, well, not last song, 5th song is Convertible, which, again, all of these songs are really fast, quick songs that take into account the fact that the band have a new lineup. And Convertible, although you think, yeah, it could be about a convertible car, it's more about actually someone being flexible in terms of the context of a relationship. And to say that, well, yes, I guess I'm convertible, just flick the switch and I'm yours. Last song on it is Sports Car. Sports Car is a great song. Like a number of wedding present songs, it is a song that I think where Gedge places himself inside an imagined situation. So although in the book Gedge Songs, he does say that all the songs are about him, but they're not. I think what we've got with all of the songs that are on Mini, all of the songs that are on Saturnalia, is that they're him projecting his personality and his viewpoint into situations that may not necessarily happen. Now, Sports Car is a song that is in the band's set list to this day. It's currently sung by current bass player Melanie Howard, and she does a fantastic version of it. And it turns the song on its head, actually, because when it's sung by a man, the idea is about, it's okay, I know you've got to go because he's walked in the room, I heard the sports car shrieking, and you don't want him to know who's on the phone with you, I can tell by the way you're speaking. So again, these are all songs about temptation, around lust, around attraction, around the complicated elements that sit inside interpersonal relationships. But of course, when it's sung by a woman as opposed to being sung by a man, then it's got a different kind of aspect that sits to it. So when Gedge sings it, and it's like, well, he's singing to a woman that has to go off the phone because someone, a boyfriend or a partner, has walked in, when actually it's a woman who sings this, you then think, well, actually, is it because the woman's you add an extra layer around gender and identity and sexual orientation that goes into it, and it's got a very kind of just lovely, sad quality to it that makes the song just feel so much deeper than I think what it's originally about. I love Mini. I think it's a great album, although it isn't an album. Obviously, it's over in 19 minutes. And this is the Edsel Records 2014 reissue of it that comes as a surprisingly a 4-disc set. So the extra tracks that are on Mini are a 7-inch single called Sucker, which is here, which you could get by mail order or was sold on the band's 1995 tour. A version of a track called Jet Girl, and a cover of Tom Waits' Red Shoes by the Drugstore. Sucker was the first post-Island Records single itself, only released as a 7-inch vinyl, so pretty difficult to get hold of on CD until a later compilation release. But the band had a thing in their contract with Island, which is that if the label refused to release or refused to accept something, that the band could then either self-publish it or sell it to another label if that's what they wanted to do. So effectively the record contract that they had with, I think, RCA, possibly with Island as well, kind of clearly indicated that the band effectively only offered the right of first refusal to the label, and if the label declined, then the band had the ability to shop it around elsewhere. So they self-pressed and self-produced their first single, going right back to the way it was in the very early days of Once More and Go Out and Get 'Em Boy, with the Sucker single. Sucker has been played live many, many times, as recently as 2005, by the way, so it wasn't a tossed off throwaway thing. The Wedding Present don't do bad songs, if that makes sense. They just write lots and lots of songs, and some fit on the album and some don't, much like Suede and Jesus and Mary Chain and Oasis and Pet Shop Boys. Some of the best songs they ever did were B-sides. And to promote Mini, the band did a huge chunk of touring with a new lineup. They turned into a 4-piece. So Jane Lockie, who sang the backing vocals on the Mini album, joined on bass, and I think Darren moved over to guitar. And there's the Mini itself that is seen on the cover that the band then did a raffle for, read out the results live, and Gedge hand delivered the vehicle to the lucky winner, whose name I do not know. CD2 of Mini contains a number of BBC session tracks. These BBC session tracks, by the way, can also be found on the 6 CD box set here, the complete Peel sessions, which, as I said, was released in 2007. And those radio session tracks are Drive, Love Machine, Sports Car, Go Man Go, and then a set at the BBC Sound City on the 12th of April 1996. I didn't go to that because I was watching the Manic Street Preachers up the road at the Town and Country Club, which is now probably an O2 Academy. So the band did track 18, the Mini prize draw, live at the Metropolitan University, Leeds, on the 12th of April. CD3 is a live tape. As I've said before, the band sold their own handmade live tape straight from the mixing desk for £5. You sent them a check, they sent you a tape in the post. This is from Rouen. No, it isn't. It's from Detroit on the 21st of March 1996, and features a mixture of songs from Mini, but also from the upcoming album Saturnalia. And then the DVD that features this, because there weren't any promo videos, because there weren't any singles, features an interview with David Gedge, an acoustic version of Drive, and the acoustic versions are absolutely fantastic, of course, as I've previously mentioned. So we have alternate shots from the artwork there, and then we kind of go into the next phase. The band's lineup changed, and they then released their 5th or 8th album, depending on your point of view, which is Saturnalia, which came out in September, I think, 1996. This was a difficult time to be a fan of the band. It was a difficult time, I think, to be in the band, and there was certainly some dissatisfaction in the band as well. And this was a double 10-inch, which I think played at 33. Might have been played at 45. This is an American copy, which for some reason still has its original 1996 price tag of $24.95 on. although really it's just imported from the UK, and then it made its way, well, it was imported from the UK into the US, and then I managed to find a copy back in the UK on Discogs. Discogs has been responsible for me spending an enormous amount of money during the course of my life, and I have never looked back since I discovered it. So this is the album, the fifth album, although because I regard Tommy and Hit Parade as albums because they were comprised of almost exclusively non-album songs and compiled with an idea of playing like an album and being sequenced appropriately alongside Minnie. I then think of Saturnalia as the eighth wedding present album, which is 8 albums in 11 years is pretty damn prolific actually. But we'll start off with a couple of other things which we're going to get to. So sorry, I should have picked up all of these things and had them on my lap like obedient little children when I started, but I didn't. Saturnalia being the fifth album, it was preceded with a single release, and you'll have to forgive me because I cannot remember which one of the singles came first. I think it was Montreal, and Montreal was the first fruits of the new lineup. So Jane Lockie from Tetsy Tetsy Fly was on bass, Paul Dorrington, formerly of Tetsy Tetsy Fly, had left, and the replacement guitar player, now that Darren had left, was Simon Cleave, also of Tetsy Tetsy Fly, which is a phrase which I've said more now than I have at any other point in my life combined. And with Simon's contribution, the band recorded the Saturnalia album, and you can hear the difference between the songs that were written when I think Darren was in the band and the songs when Simon and Jane were in the band. They have a different melodic approach, and you can really hear, elements of the former band, Tetsy Tetsy Fly, when you listen to the guitar lines that Simon's writing. When you listen to that other band, you can hear and go, yep, that's the guitar from the wedding present there. That's got the same kind of melodic sensibility, the same kind of sounds, the same kind of chord progressions and structure and approach and build. There's a song by Tetsy Tetsy Fly called M1, which is not a great song. I'm not a huge fan of the band, but you can listen to it and you go, yep, that could have been a wedding present song in another world. And so I think the first release was Montreal, although I will quickly check the catalogue numbers just to be absolutely sure. No, complete nonsense. Montreal was the second single from the album. The first one was 2 3 Go, and kind of following on from the theme which was in Go Man Go on the mini album. This is backed with an acoustic version of a track called Real Thing, an acoustic version of a song called Jet Girl, which had previously been released on a compilation, and a song called Up. Not the most memorable of singles, I'm afraid to say. When I read the lyrics, I go, oh, it's that one. But it's not the type of song that necessarily would leap out at you and you think that's an absolute kind of corking, cracking hit single at all, I'm afraid to say. Which makes it sound bitchier than it actually is. 2 3 Go has a very fun, light approach. It kind of builds upon the influence of things like 60s surf pop vocal melodies from the Beach Boys, that you would have from Paul Dorrington and the Watusi period, but then it kind of elevates itself into another thing completely. In 2 3 Go is perhaps a bad title for a really, really good song, but there isn't a particular chorus where you'd sit there and go, yep, that really sits next to it, because it's around, ride white horses today, buy a red Chevrolet, go swim the Zambezi, do it because it's easy, fly close to the sun, do it because it's fun, let's go swim the Zambezi, let's do it because it's easy. Which, of course, if I were David Gedge, I would sing that melodically and you go, oh, that sounds like a hit single. But unfortunately, calling the song 2 3 Go probably wasn't the right thing, because it just didn't work. And people went, I don't even know what song that is. And this was in 1996, in the days before Shazam. So it was difficult for you to work out what it was unless you were the kind of guy that went into a record store and went, there's a song about swimming in the Zambezi. I really like it. Who is it? And unless the guy behind the counter, and if you went to a certain record store in Birmingham, the guy behind the counter was my brother, then unless he knew the song, you could go, I haven't got a clue, mate. There's no song called Swim the Zambezi that's in the charts. So I think maybe a different title would have been the right move for 2 3 Go. So we kind of get to the album itself, Saturnalia. And to talk about Saturnalia, by the way, I have to be kind of really honest and go, it's not my favourite wedding present album. I really like it because I don't think they've made a bad album. In fact, David Gedge has never done a bad album, but it's not my favourite. What you can hear in Saturnalia, which is an extension of what you can hear in Watusi, is the beginning of what was going to happen after The Wedding Present. So Saturnalia was the last album that was recorded by The Wedding Present during their first life. The band split in January 1997, and David Gedge formed another band called Cinerama. Cinerama are fantastic, and I will talk about them in another episode. But Cinerama took a lot of the more pop stylings from Watusi and Saturnalia and Mini and built upon those and created a sound that was very, very different. So if you think about The Wedding Present, you probably think about a bunch of angry guitars and what sounds like a bunch of middle-aged men trapped in a wardrobe that's falling down the stairs arguing with a cat. And that's in no way a criticism. I absolutely love that sound. But The Wedding Present sounds, people think The Wedding Present sound is a collection of noises, of serrated guitars, of harsh vocals with a northern edge and lyrics about falling in love that are darkly humorous. Whereas Saturnalia and Watusi, to a lesser extent, had a wider, broader sound. When I saw the band in 2016 play Tunbridge Wells, and they played the Saturnalia album in full, they had an expanded lineup with a keyboard player, backing vocals, to really kind of flesh out the sound of the songs, because they couldn't really do the songs of Saturnalia justice. As a four-piece, you needed an extra musician in the group, even though Saturnalia itself is a four-piece album. Now, Saturnalia as a title is the name of the ancient Roman festival that runs between the 17th and 23rd of December, kind of like a pagan version of Christmas. We are now in December after all, and that means that, of course, Christmas and little baby Jesus are going to be all over our televisions, and there's inevitably going to be a Richard Curtis film on television and possibly a James Bond one. And possibly the worst combination of both. If there was a James Bond film that was directed by Richard Curtis, that would almost definitely be on television as well. But Saturnalia takes its name from the Roman pagan festival for the celebration of renewal and redemption and luxury and generation and general all kinds of indulgent recreational activities. So if you want to think about what Saturnalia might look like in the flesh, it's probably a festival of frivolity that makes Caligula look like the Sound of Music, and Saturnalia therefore takes its cue from the name of that festival, being these are all songs that are around, you know, pleasure and sin and alcohol and sex and food and gluttony and all the seven deadly sins all wrapped up into two 10-inch discs. And there's all the songs, as I've said before, have Gedge putting himself into situations that probably he hasn't experienced for quite some time. There's also a theory that Saturnalia, I think, also alludes to the astrological concept of Saturn returns. Saturn returns is a thing which is, in astrological concepts, people between the ages of about 27 and 33, between about 59 and 62, for example, experience where Saturn returns to its original place in the astrological chart, where it would have been when you were born. And Saturn's orbit is something like 30.7 years. So every 30.7 years, people kind of experience almost a sort of midlife crisis or a moment of realization. You know, when you're approaching the age of 30 as an adult, you're probably at the point in your life where you should probably settle down and get a job and a wife and a cat and a dog and 2 cars and a husband and a mortgage and a pension plan. And of course, the flip side of that is when you get to the age of about 60, society tells you that you need to, you know, put away the childish things and become a pensioner, pass the barometer of the 1 foot in the grave era of your life, and wear things like cardigans and watch programs about railways, trains, and possibly World War II bombers. Of course, I'm already at that point of wearing cardigans and watching programs about model trains, and of course running a YouTube channel about old music that was made when I was half my age, because, by the way, this was made in the first half of my life, this record. And I came to The Wedding Present very late in my life, relatively speaking. I quite liked them from about 1989 through to about 2004, and then I heard the Take Fountain album, and I was like, my God, where have this band been all my life? And after that, I have been in all the way. The band have matured like a fine wine, whereas perhaps some of their then contemporaries have aged like milk. Saturnalia then 12 songs, 12 really great songs, and I said 12 songs that I think are very, very underrated in the Wedding Present canon. Every song that's on this album I think is really good and really strong, but the flip side of that is that as an album as a whole, it doesn't really cohere into a singular artistic statement. It sounds like about three bands playing at the same time. And as I've said before, you can hear the impact of having new members in the lineup. So the impact of having Simon Cleve join the band, of having Darren leaving, Jane joining the band on bass. You can start to hear kind of the fact that even though the cliche is all the songs sound the same, they most definitely don't. So Saturnalia has a number of releases. This is an original 1996 CD. I have turned the booklet around because I think this is a much better cover than the one which is on the record itself. When you look at the cover of Saturnalia, it's really difficult to work out what that is, although clearly that's Saturn's rings. If you weren't looking at that knowing that the album was called Saturnalia, you'd go, what is it? Whereas I prefer this, which is a bastardization of the NASA National Aeronautical and Space Administration of America logo, and the booklet is relatively small. There was a single that was released after the release of Montreal. This was after the release of Saturnalia. This was the last Wedding Present single released during the band's first life. It came on 2 7-inches. Here's one backed with the theme from Where Everybody Knows Your Name. The theme from Cheers was a limited edition 7-inch, and there was another limited edition 7-inch. This was backed with a new and original B-side track called Project Senzo, which I don't think the band have played live for a very, very, very long time indeed. If you had the CD single of Montreal, as mentioned before, it came in a die-cut sleeve. And it was backed with an acoustic version of Sports Car and live versions of My Favourite Dress from Leeds and Brassneck from the Reading Festival in August 1996. So if in order to get all the B-sides you had to buy all 3 formats, presumably that would push the song right to the toppermost of the charts. Didn't work. And at that point, the Wedding Present split up. I think playing their last show in Liverpool on the 17th of January 1997. As I kind of said before, the album was released in September 1996. I think it was time for the band to take a break. They'd been together for 11 years, and I think David felt that it was time to do something different. There were musical ambitions he wasn't going to be able to fulfill inside the Wedding Present, although now the Wedding Present has reconfigured itself to be able to fulfill most people's musical ambitions and to really sound like anything it wants to. At the time, I think there was the idea that the Wedding Present was perhaps a band that existed in a particular box, and that particular box had loud guitars and a certain type of vocal, and there are obviously no human being is one-dimensional in terms of their musical taste, which is why when I reviewed Metallica next to Pet Shop Boys, one of the commenters thought I was on a wind. I was like, no, I like an awful lot, a wide broad church of music, and that includes going on any given day from listening to Slayer to then going and listening to Chemical Brothers, for example, with a detour via one of the finest bands in the world, the Twilight Sad. And Saturnalia did not set the charts alight. The band, from a commercial perspective, was not selling the kind of numbers that it used to. It was playing smaller venues with capacities of 300, 400, 500, as opposed to maybe 3,000 or 4,000. The days of headlining Brixton were long gone, and the band had become, I think, a far more streamlined operation, a village business, as opposed to a global multinational. And Gedge had become captain of his own ship, and he could do what he wanted with it. And what he wanted to do was to put the Wedding Present to an end, pause it, and start another band called Cinerama. Which eventually happened, because the things in Cinerama, which I mentioned previously, the more kind of pop inflected, broader sounds, the use of different instruments, keyboards, strings, horns, flutes, arpeggios, backing vocals, lots and lots of extra musicians, all that type of thing, which clearly sounded like the soundtrack to an imaginary 1960s Italian crime caper shot in Britain, were the things which became the trademark sounds of Cinerama. And the Wedding Present obviously were angry men and one woman with a guitar making a lot of noise. In 2014, Saturnalia was released as part of the Edsel series of the first 8 major albums by the Wedding Presents as a 4-disc set. This version as the non-album single tracks appended at the end of the album on disc 1. So that's Project Senzo, the theme from Cheers, and acoustic versions of Sports Car, Jet Girl, The Real Thing, and finally Up from the 2-3 Go single. CD 2 here is the Reading Festival appearance on the 25th of August 1996. Brass Neck from this show appears on the CD single of Montreal, alongside a acoustic radio session for Virgin Radio in 1996, performing Rotterdam and Montreal, and their last acoustic radio session during the Wedding Presents first live for BBC Radio London, performing acoustic versions of Rotterdam and The Real Thing. Live tape number 17, recorded in Munich, is the 3rd CD, and that was recorded on the 17th of December 1996, the first day of the Saturnalia Festival, by the way, which has an 18-song set. Again, the CD version of one of the band's live tapes, which means there are now 2 live tapes between numbers 1 and 18, which have yet to debut on CD, although they are appearing on MP3 and fan circles. And then the DVD features the promotional video for Montreal, an acoustic version of Jet Girl, and an interview with David Gedge from Home in Hove in 2014. And the writing credits on the album, by the way, feature 2 different lineups. So the Darren Belk and Jane Lockey era of the band write a number of songs. The 3-piece version do the writing for Real Thing and Dream World. 2-3 Go features the contribution from Simon Cleve. Snake Eyes features, surprisingly, the lineup of Darren on bass and Paul Dorrington on guitar whilst writing it. So it was a song that was written 2 lineups ago. And then we also have a number of other songs that are written by 3 separate lineups, and you know, the portion of writing credits is fairly democratic. You can listen to the album, although it sounds like the work of one band, it's the work of 3 different lineups of the Wedding Presents, which are all kind of stuck together. And you know, the songs I think are really strong, by the way. One of the songs, I think Montreal, is an absolute Wedding Present classic. Nobody can deny that. I think that's one of their best songs, actually. And the album kind of closes on I think a couple of really great songs. So it closes on Kansas, Jet Girl, and then the last song is 50s. And you listen to it and you just think that doesn't sound like a band that's come to the end of its life. It sounds like a band that's got a lot more left to give. But I think for that particular period of the band, it was time for the band to bring itself to a close. There comes a certain point when you think, well, you've just got to take a break. You've got to stop and take stock and think about it and go, is this something you really want to do? Gedge never fell out of love with The Wedding Present. And he continued to have a working relationship with Simon Cleve for at least a decade after this album was released. But this was the last Wedding Present album released during the band's main lifespan. And I think it's a really great album about relationships and around the observations that you have watching other people's relationships and how people interact with each other, and sometimes inserting yourself into that narrative by going, well, if I was a person who'd been in that position, how would I respond? And a lot of the songs that I write from the perspective of, if I were a person in an imaginary situation, how would I respond to that situation, whatever that is? And it's a it's a skill, and it's a way of understanding kind of who you are and what you believe, and the things that make you you. And I think that if a writer does nothing but autobiography, it becomes pretty dry and dull, because ultimately most people through the course of their life, they're trying to drive out drama and unhappiness. And when you achieve a state of relative calm and peace, that is something which you want to concentrate on and maintain, almost like being a constant gardener. Is you need to stop the roots of unhappiness and the roots of dissent from growing around you. So therefore there can become a point where, like Trent Reznor said, is the songs that he wrote in 1991, he performs now with the same passion that he did then, but he's now narrating a version of his history as opposed to living it in real time in front of you. And I think that's one of the great strengths that The Wedding Present always had, was being able to continue to find things of interest and innovation when talking about relationships. The Wedding Present had a couple of things that they needed to do to wind up the band. They owed some records to Cookie and Vinyl when they made the decision to split. And so in 1998, with the band officially now over, they released the John Peel Sessions 1992 to 1995 on CD. This contains 3 John Peel sessions between 1992 and 1995, including, as I've mentioned before, the first commercial release of the track Softly Softly, and songs from the Hit Parade, Watusi and Minnie as well. All of those sessions are now on the Wedding Presents 2007 John Peel Sessions box set. If you have this, you still need to buy this, but if you have this, you don't need to buy that. Guess which order I bought them in, boys and girls? Yes, I bought this version first. There you go. And then there was the last one, which fulfilled their contract to Cooking Vinyl of a sort, which was the singles 95 to 1997. And this saw the CD debuts of Sucker, Waiting on the Guns, the original version of Jet Girl, took Red Shoes by the Drugstore from a Tom Waits compilation album, included the mini album. It included the B-sides to 2-3 Go, Montreal, and the 2 live tracks from Leeds and Reading respectively, My Favourite Dress and Brassneck. The band played their last show in Liverpool, January 1997, and then they took a break, to use a phrase of Friends. And David continued writing songs, and he then announced his next band called Cinerama, which I will mention in the next episode when I talk about the Wedding Present. Overall, Saturnalia is in my opinion, in the bottom half of Wedding Present albums, and that's not to say it's not really, really good, because it is really, really good, and I think there's some fantastic songwriting on here. I think Kansas, Jet Girl, Montreal, 2-3 Go, Real Thing are as good as any Wedding Present song that has been written. I think the album suffered from a combination of factors, one of being an ever-changing lineup, the other one being not being written by multiple lineups of the band, is that there were some songs that had been written 2 or 3 lineups ago which hadn't yet made it onto an album. And so what that meant is that the album sounded more like a compilation of previously unreleased Wedding Present songs as opposed to a Wedding Present album. And the third factor, and we cannot overstate this actually, is that the world had changed around the Wedding Present. Oasis, Blur, Suede, Pulp, they were all the big new hip thing. Underworld, Left Field, Chemical Brothers, they were all absolutely enormous as well. The Wedding Present had not necessarily grown in the same direction as some of their fans had, and the two had grown apart. And I think David felt that it was time to bring the Wedding Present to an end and think about the future. With that, that's where I'm going to wrap up for today, talking about Saturnalia. What I will say is, I love this band. This is a really good album. It's not their best album, but not their best album is still better than the sum total of some people's careers. And having seen it played live in 2016, I think the band and the album get a very unfair rap. I saw them last weekend at the Forum, the venue formerly known as the Town and Country, with John Stewart on guitar, Melanie on bass, and a drummer whose name I always forget on drums. And they're a fantastic lineup, fantastic show. Had an absolutely great time. They're touring Sea Monsters at the moment. They sound incredible. Go see them if you get the opportunity and you like them. They are as good now as I think they ever have been. And John on guitar is the best guitarist they've had in quite a while. He clearly really loves playing in the group, and I really love seeing somebody who really loves playing in the band. It's exciting times to be a Wedding Present fan. They've just announced their new series for 2022, a series called 24 Songs, 12 7-inch singles, released 1 a month for the next 12 months, starting in January. I have subscribed. Inevitably, there will be a CD release and an LP release of those at the end of the period. But in the meantime, there are 24 wedding present songs to come out in the next 12 months, and there's going to be a lot of live shows. So thank you for making it this far. If you made it to the end, if you haven't, I can say whatever I like about you because you're not watching, but I won't because I'm nice. And I just to kind of just wrap up and go. Obviously, be lovely in the comments. Stay beautiful. I will see you all soon, and go and support the bands that you love. I've seen the Spotify numbers, and Spotify pays bugger all to the bands. If you love a band, buy the records, buy the t-shirts, go and see them play live. It's the only way to keep a band afloat, is because bands can't work for free. You wouldn't go to work for free, and the bands that we love can't live their lives on nothing but Spotify royalties. Go buy the t-shirts, buy the records, buy the gig tickets, and if you like a band and you love them, tell other people that you think might like them. That's exactly what I'm doing all of these for, is because I love all of the bands that I'm talking about. I may not always agree with everything that they do, and I may not always think everything they're doing is a particularly good idea, such as, for example, that new Guns N' Roses song that came out a few months ago. But there's something about the band that got you into them, and you should always stay in touch or keep in touch with your friends. Bands are your friends, and they send you messages from their lives that help you through yours. Stay beautiful. See you all again soon. Thank you, and bye.